Abusianfo na tie for ahaya for 1GH na no first time aba so any di no buo kwan so na wa subscribe ya man se benyi news bia no shi bia benyi notification phone so na wa be sha fin so man fi so be sha mo adam for so enye be tie for me nkan san so tin yete ha na enra eye dasene samria na eye speaker bamba bi e decline eye Afenyo markings eye omo record na some record for the third time at the same we see ya or de ni hwehwe nim could re ewo eye Supreme Court so eye some bad ruling bia tukuba mu nyina eden eken bia mu se eye the former chief justice mu nyina ene enim ye bom nyina eden eken bi ekan se o so ruling we dia we the anko ye kra ruling in favor of eye Afenyo markings two judges so no omo and sideline with a Afenyo markings and so a babon to make can say me just na information at here. Right now no and MPs for ni be soon. Now why na soon a KT am one babon tin say never who ye pa aden na never so or say speaker anya de I speaker is the speaker is in bed with a year behind this kasa sa shano osuguni yem obenya kwampo speaker ide asa ajomatum isan say ombeso mo pass some a year beka bills be $250 million be just ombeso mo kwaje right now mo this can yeden at this crucial moment mo this can yeden yenim se mbasa mo jikocheche ema eye mombe to abamam de nim bie nim at say Afenyo markets any abre sechenchina ne yemfre o fry den eno na je say no eye nchichimu aba che say and this is a letter at the comma a year becan speaker Bamba ben say in case Afenyo markets letter ba omonya de omundi class a you know and penampa a year speaker Bamba ben sideline with a year beka a out of forcing now right now ye kasano ye say the letter na a Afenyo markets extra comma a speaker Bamba beno on one kasa addressing as a year the majority leader in MPP Amanyuko, the majority leader in your parliament. Now, so I speak and Barbing respond on the man, a becker for your markets and your gra. As more catching say, or addressing as the leader of Ghana business, one got the leader of a parliament as a majority leader of a MPP Amanyuko. When a signal me, you say, Afenyo markets any a majority leader be a minority. Coming in good in Chichimuaba. Any Niemani senior a Kitiamo is one fonso about needing common at
in the central region. And some bills, including the Environmental Protection Agency bill, that bill that has that commitment that was made by government to have the LI 2462 that permits mining in forest reserves be, as it were, revoked. That is still on our books as a result of what's happening in Parliament. Social Protection Bill 2023, a number of bills as well intending to merge some institutions still on the ice and still before Parliament, not approved as yet. Now, this was the demand that Alexander Afenyo sent to have the Speaker consider Parliament sitting tomorrow, the 28th and the 29th. Then the minority, in fact, you have the NDC caucus in Parliament as well, also writing, urging the Speaker not to heed to this call by the MPP to recall Parliament. This is Governor Hammond, who is a Minister for Trade and Industry, Member of Parliament for the Asqua constituency, and he had this to say when the Speaker declined this request by their leader. Take a look.
The Speaker is in the pocket of the NDC. We thought that the Speaker will just recall Parliament and the NDC will stay away. But some of us also thought that, well, knowing who he is and what he has now become, it was likely that he would hack in to the cries of the NDC and its apparatchik. I wish him well. Let him go on behave unconstitutionally.
So that's Katie Hammond says, well, in his view, the Speaker's response denying, in fact, that call by the NPP to have Parliament recalled is because the Speaker is in the pocket of the NDC. That's Katie Hammond's verdict. This is what the Speaker said, that Alexander Afenyo as you may be aware, the performance of the functions of Parliament and the duties of members of Parliament extends beyond the plenary sittings of Parliament. Again, the parliamentary calendar acknowledges elections campaign periods. This season is for the government, parties, and both presidential and parliamentary candidates to present their manifestos to the people and to account and justify how the mandate given them by the voters for the 4-year term of office has been applied to the benefit of the people. And he writes to Afenyo, bearing in mind the provisions of Article 296A and B of the Constitution and the closeness of your proposed dates, that's 28, 29 November, to the general election on the 7th December, he, as Speaker, is of the considered view and opinion that it will not be in the national interest to interrupt campaigns of members and parties by a recall to plenary. This was one of the major considerations that the Speaker took in arriving at that decision not to grant that call by Alexander Afenyo to have Parliament recalled tomorrow, 28th and 29th. But you see, beyond all this, the germane question in here as well is whether or not if the Speaker had granted this request by Alexander Afenyo, if he, as leader, was going to be able to marshal his MPs from across the country who are thick and neck deep in their campaigning 10 days to this crucial election. That's a fundamental question in there. But there's a provision both in the standing orders of Parliament and in the Constitution that sought to back and support what the Speaker has done right now. Dennis Wadam Squires with me right here. Dennis, what does the orders of Parliament, in fact, the standing orders of Parliament say?
Well, so under the standing orders of Parliament, there are a number of ways that Parliament can be recalled. So we have seen the majority leader in the past try to invoke the provisions of the standing order to have Parliament recalled under one instance where he attached signatures of some particular MPs because the order under which he came required a certain number of MPs to have appended their signature for that recall to happen. So when you look at the provisions under the Order 53(1) and 2 of Parliament, there is a heading that says that meeting by request, into brackets, of Article 1123 of the 1992 Constitution. What it means is that this order is founded on that provision of the Constitution. And one says that despite any other provision, 15% of members of Parliament may request a meeting of Parliament, and the Speaker shall, within 7 days after the receipt of the request, summon Parliament. The 2 says that Parliament shall convene within 7 days after the issuance of the notice of summons. So it means that cumulatively, this process will take roughly 14 days to happen. Now, when you look at this closely, it gives you some requirements that need to be met. 1, there have to be some 15% of the members of Parliament who have accented their signatures to the request that has been made. 2, it has to be within 7 days for the Speaker to give a notice, and Parliament shall be convened within 7 days after the notice has been served. That is just one leg of it. What we have seen in circulation now with respect to the majority leader's request does not come with the signatures and this request. In fact, he quotes the law under which he comes. And we'll look at that pretty shortly. So this is an extension of the first leg of it, which makes reference to a constitutional provision. So this is the constitutional provision on which the Order 53 is founded. Okay. Now, this is the order.
Parliament has not been settled as yet. But this attempt to recall Parliament to sit tomorrow, that's Thursday the 28th, and Friday the 29th, was triggered by Alexander Afenyo and some members of the NPP and caucus in Parliament, sending a memo to the Speaker. And it contained this request that a number of what has been described by them as urgent government business is suffering as a result of Parliament being adjourned sine die. These were the businesses that they talked about. First off, the request for tax exemptions, as we're seeing there, and designated for the companies under the One District, One Factory initiative. Also, the Ghana Financial Stability Fund and International Development Association facility of $250 million. In fact, this Financial Stability Fund had the sole aim of cushioning the financial institutions that were heavily impacted by this domestic debt exchange program. In the absence of this, you can understand how a number of these financial institutions and insurance companies are having to maneuver to stay afloat and alive. But that is also still on the ice as a result of Parliament being on recess, or in fact, being adjourned sine die. The consideration of the President's nominations for appointment as Justice of the Supreme Court. There are 2 Supreme Court nominees that have not been approved by the plenary as yet because Parliament is on, that's been adjourned sine die. Ratification of the mining lease agreement between Ghana and that's the Ashanti Bauxite Company Limited for the mining of bauxite in the Nyenyenyeni Block 2 area in Chimamponwa. That's not the only one. And there's another mining lease agreement which is still before Parliament, not approved as yet. The Barari DV Ghana Limited for the exploitation of lithium at Ĉriës.
I wish you for any sema a year German ababontin ababeka. Na in sema just a year KTM on the 2 Jana. Na ne kumemono just ashini pa because Nema is speaker Bambabi a year of Parliament na money answer because now then 137 na se when your sympathy be mamma is a mumonya a year majority yana tibia binti some majority and namusu be ma namatam the Supreme Court according to the constitutional ewo abemono se niema bi e course of parliament I was a parliament and kasa survey ye o mra a year other institution to say a year the Supreme Court be intervene but niema isi o parliament ni kwan say Afenyo Ḳeartțroken the course a Supreme Court no nanzo ye ni Supreme Court rule na ba bontin no I just say 4 judges I just say be kan omo ye den omo sideline with a year be kan a year Afenyo Ḳeartțroken ane in Simbi at the Supreme Court and judge vote to so explaining the reason why a man sideline with a Afenyo Ḳeartțroken. Uti a man some on the bar and chess or say at the beginning of the case now Kazanka Semonanga Nini Kwansenka a Afenyo Ḳeartțroken at the bow. Nance what Tamasemno at the koi. Right now, no, I become is become Bambabin so I declare signing because Okache Supreme Court for some maybe Parliament because kids no more mena me pan and baby mena me person me be me say me declare where you be there. A year beka according to the constitution say mo amodoso no ewo a parliament no mo na mo ye majority mo amusa ewo a parliament mo na mo ye in the minority. So tibia binti 4 seats declared vacant. That means o majority na kuta ya Jeffrey say Nanso letter I have Afenyo Ḳeartțroken Ĉriës a speaker no. Or can say as the majority leader blah 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 the comma a speaker Bambabi. Speaker Bambabi so reply no one can say via we majority leader say because letter you can say via hello say but catch and say or no na the leader of Ghana business one can say on majority leader in Parliament. That means one semi or now so after the election no in himself drama be koso cause obi claim so a majority out of force so a majority leader Afenyo Ḳeartțroken is so a majority leader ain't why na ba kwakota the majority side because me the president a year beka a year speaker Bambabin year na was say ono me majority nominate na me right side ain't right now we get declaring vacant over there. And then a drama about bunting, how basic chinsim what is a nyas and get what you can call a first call. Ye buy assume you the second one I must acquire. I think I must say a year and this if I could now sit in Timonco. I'm could jump bunting a press conference near the other day. Some attach and will be Nipa no and the Timibura Parliament abra is become a barbet national. Now so after a year Parliament no a suspended indefinitely no. Kujina bontin a press conference Kesi you need an hour person Ĉriës. We say call for third one and as a speaker I did decline a coming good in same year course a bar near the uncommon idea.
under which the majority leader comes under. He comes under orders 57.3 and 4 of the Parliament Standing Orders.
Okay.
Which reads, 4 says that the Speaker may summon a meeting of the House before the date or time to which the House has been adjourned, or at any date or time after the House has been adjourned sine die. 4 says that the Speaker shall summon Parliament within a period determined by the Speaker, and the requirement for a 14-day notice shall not apply where this is an emergency.
Okay.
So the majority leader comes under this, effectively saying that, I know that using the 14-day period, we may not be in time. Mind you, in this particular one, he actually proposes that Thursday and Friday should have been the days for the sitting. And if he had gone under the previous one, what it means is that that would not work. And if you look at the reading, Alfred, of the earlier provision, you see something like Parliament shall convene. However, when you look at the order 57.3, it says that the Speaker may. So you hear a conversation about the Speaker having to exercise some discretion as to whether to convene the House or not. And clearly, when you read the Speaker's memo to the leader of government business, for some reason, the Speaker does not describe Alexander Afenyo Makin as majority leader, even though Alexander Afenyo Makin wrote in his capacity as majority leader and leader of government business. The Speaker responds by only addressing him as leader of government business.
That points something to you, does it?
Yes, that signals something. But that's just besides the point. For this context, the Speaker talks about how he is unable to exercise his discretion in this particular instance in favor of a meeting that should be tomorrow and on Friday, because election is close. Here. Governments, members of parliament would have to meet their constituents to present to them their manifestos, even though the majority leader thought it was beyond that. He actually wanted them to show to Ghanaians that beyond what had happened at the Supreme Court and all that, there's still unity in parliament. But the Speaker, unfortunately, doesn't think otherwise. But this is the law backing it, Alfred.
I see, and so the Speaker is within the law in doing this, because you hear Andia Piakobe is saying that the Speaker really had no business in taking this path, but based on what you have indicated, it's not really binding on the Speaker. He exercises his discretion because the wording there is that the Speaker may, and not shall. Okay, but let's have a conversation on this. Dr. Rashid Draman, Executive Director of the Africa Center for Parliamentary Affairs, joining us on Zoom right now. Appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us. Now, you've been following this quite close. We've been with you every step of the way. Does this come to you as a surprise? I'm sure not, isn't it?
Not indeed, as Alfred. It didn't come as a surprise. I mean, if you follow the series of events, right from when this crisis broke out, I think you don't need to be a prophet to predict that we could come to this kind of outcome. You know, at the beginning of this crisis, a lot of us cautioned Parliament and the actors that this really required some kind of political solution. And I remember, even in some of our conversations, I did indicate that in order for us to get out of this crisis, we needed the leaders of the three arms of government, that is the Speaker, the Chief Justice, and His Excellency the President, convening and maybe together with the two leaders of the two caucuses, because, you know, that was needed in order to avert a situation like this where we got to a point where everybody is following legal procedure in order to justify their action. Because when you get to that point, I think it becomes quite difficult. I mean, everything gets derailed one way or the other. And, you know, I have seen this happen in some parliaments. And in fact, at the beginning of this 8th parliament, I think I had the occasion of sharing some experiences from Southern Africa with some of the leaders that if care was not taken and then we didn't have some compromise and consensus, we were going to end up with a lot of legal matters that could disturb the functioning of Parliament. And this is where we are.
See, this is where we are. I recall, Dr. Shidoman, you proposed at the beginning of all this, what you described as a negotiated compromise. And from how things are playing out now, that has not happened, and clearly it may not happen, is it not?
It was ever, because we hear snipers here and there in the media about, some attempts and so on. I mean, whether they really happened or not, the outcome, I mean, it doesn't point to any kind of solution that was reached, because even as at today, both caucuses are calling themselves the majority. I was on your program earlier today, this evening, with Honorable Kofi Adams, and he kept referring to Honorable Afenyo as the minority leader, which means that his leader is a majority leader. Even if at this point we still don't have that settlement, I think it presupposes that not very much effort. And Alfred, at the beginning of this, I was saying if we had our elders in this country, that was the time that we really needed them. But nobody took that seriously, because, if this matter, it's not resolved, even when Parliament is recalled after the elections, we are still going to see some drama.
For a year, German Ababontin, Ababekani, Chichemo, the Tuja, the France, senior a year speaker Bambabi decline a year after your markings record now, or more a person must have fair Parliament beam on Thursday and Friday. Now, just in case a watch now, any opportunity to say, as our corner and Yambaso, because you're caught into a crucial election, no, a month for any sad general business biennial, emergency business biennial, or I just say, it's an emergency business now, or say, or outline or another letter, no, check on my speaker from Barbie, and I just say, and some AC cable, but also may air they approve 250 million a year because US dollars, and just say, any Sikaketo Inimsa, Sikan Diomno Quadia. Now, right now, no, and I is all chim no say, a Kitiamo, I say bonny tip Kakramati. I am also about 110 or say now come on any ye pan because ocean reaction is in the Casemon to say, is soon gone or Sugunimo, and I say, Speaker and Barbie, the into declare a year because Afenyo markets and I say MPs for no every call to a parliament and say, Speaker and Barbie, would see NDC for he's in bed with a NDC MPs no into the MP Manu Kunibeka teacher and Afenyo markets Becano and you know Barbie tea. And into no idea would decline, but any now right now I can say NDC for the country first let the other comma ASB Gab and Barbie say in case Afenyo markets as I actually let say yes and record Parliament be ma a idea on the boss and boy in Tungu in him said Nancy Mono and a Becca a the flambe of a Yendi Samanyu Kuno a John Dramani Mahamano Ebabon can say After markings, the Indians young Parliament beam, no fair young connect and coachna, or no Ankasangara no uncle on business. And Panyam Power Sha, a speak up and Baby 80. Now our shed decline a hunisent as you because I can't few days to a election or a federal parliament after the a year become election or the opposite can be on. Niaka, and I'm from Mukamio and say a constituency or cramp, some of the move with him out about one thing as a pre-power. Right now, I can say even the MPs for no campono. Or quite ben so now bed gathers uncle for the normal parliament because then I'm from I am here to say MPs for because I say any idea of money a year for your market in the parliament. Ain't it? Or quite ben so now bed gather my mako. I do benya ibino I like said your more can for my okay no mudi agenti. South press conference now quay wa bonting the outside the air. Parliament a chamber no enye MPs vonya no omoye do mugina obi kakre no mdiwechi that means enema wo ye na ebi monya den eno enya adwen samata chance ono onya adwen Kenya points ono onya adwen nkofo obi wa omoye do mono ono onya adwen because enema ye no sebi as emfa kwem owie no kan say ban eye Afenyo markings chere eye krata ekwakoma speaker Bamba means oh be our Sena or Monia the MB Parliament. Afenyo Markins twa command no catch speaker Bambabe or let him say or majority leader. Now so response speaker Bambabe and respond Afenyo Markins one dress no as or no beka the majority leader in parliament. Name work I say the leader Ghana or can say the leader of Ghana business in parliament. One can say the majority leader in parliament. Now we can put signal say oh nya majority BM or minority. Oh opportunity be balance become in the amount of majority not to be meet declare seat 4 seat we cannot about be minority or what am same with the court Supreme Court. Then time na am go to 160 seat na there. As na mbese we address of frame near the adin na there. Mama wanting our mekanche Michael Kwemu na say den. Michael Kwemu time kwampo no say the same issue kwampo AC here. Just say ye beka Michael Kwemu kwa de one man from Akroma me den no declare bi movie kan na mo den visam go to 160 seat. Inti ba akwa film kwampa enya de ndisi for number 2 kwa ekwan bia so da na akwa 137 na ipa for film no de mo ya makoma mo ya inti o da atamasam ne ko Supreme Court asem no go do Supreme Court so a chief judge ko no so sabi koku dem mo akọ Supreme Court da tukuba mo former chief judge so fa kufomo enim ye bo mu nyina kan bi amu se niema wo ye Supreme Court no ruling na bad hunsem nyina so Ghana chesena obia can be chesena nya asem gotwa third calling na speaker Bambabe I decline hunsem bro ne te wo odu ni mabetima na chair adwen coming so betim so ahya ma dan for so nya bi ahwe higher for anchi chakram nyina